The alarm cut through the ship before I even opened my eyes. Red light pulsed across the ceiling of my quarters, and a voice from the wall spoke in a tone that left no room for questions. The Dominion fleet has entered the system. All personnel report to the council deck immediately. I was still pulling my jacket over my shoulders as I ran through the corridor, past officers who moved aside without a word. My name is Ethan Cole. I had spent 6 years as the human ambassador to species I never expected to meet, and in all that time, I had never once heard that alarm sound for real. The council deck was already full when I arrived. Through the wide viewport I could see them. Dozens of warships, hanging silent against the stars, their hulls shaped like folded blades. At the center of that formation sat a vessel larger than the rest, glowing faintly gold, carrying the one person every diplomat in this sector feared to disappoint. Queen Shaai of the Kothes Dominion. Grace Whitfield, my aide, stood near the main console, her face pale but steady. She had served with me since the beginning, and she knew, better than anyone, what today could mean. She is requesting a direct transmission, Grace said. Audio and visual. She wants you specifically, Ethan, not the council, not the assembly, you. I nodded once, because there was no time to feel anything else. Open the channel. The screen flickered, and then she appeared. Queen Shaai filled the frame with a presence that seemed to press against the room itself. 4 eyes, pale and unblinking, studied me, the way a hunter studies something it has already decided to catch. Ambassador Cole, she said, her voice smooth and unhurried. You have kept me waiting for 6 years. That patience ends today. I kept my hands steady at my sides. I am listening, Your Majesty. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she continued. Withdraw every human colony from the Kesserine Drift. Hand over your jump gate technology to my Ministry of Ascension for full inspection. Place your home system under Dominion oversight, as is proper for a species so young in the galaxy. Refuse, and my fleet will not leave your sun until your world answers to me directly. Behind me I heard someone shift their weight, a small sound of tension breaking through discipline. I did not turn around. I kept my eyes on her. Your Majesty, I said, may I ask you something before I answer? She tilted her head, clearly not expecting the question. Speak. Do you know why your scouting ship stopped reporting from the Kesserine Drift 4 days ago? The silence that followed was heavier than the alarm had been. Her eyes flicked, just slightly, toward something off-screen, someone she trusted enough to glance at without hiding it. Explain yourself, she said. We did not destroy them, I said. We did not need to. We simply asked them to leave, and they did. Every ship and every crew, without a single weapon fired. Somewhere between your border and ours, your people decided that following your order into the drift was not worth whatever they found waiting for them there. Her 4 eyes stayed fixed on me, unreadable. I let the moment stretch, because I needed her to feel the weight of it before I said anything more. You should ask your Ministry of Ascension what we have been building past the drift for the last 6 years, I said, while your scouts were counting our ships instead of asking what those ships were protecting. For the first time since the transmission began, the Queen did not answer immediately. Around me, the council deck stayed absolutely still, as if any sound might break whatever balance had formed in that silence. Laura Bennett, our chief engineer, stood near the far wall, arms crossed, watching the exchange with the same intensity as everyone else. She had spent the last 6 years working on something most of the assembly still did not fully understand, a project buried so deep in classification that even I only knew the parts I needed to know. Today, for the first time, I understood exactly why that secrecy had mattered. The Queen finally spoke again, her voice sharper this time. You dare imply that my fleet is not capable of ending your entire species before your sun rises twice. I am not implying anything, Your Majesty, I said. I am telling you plainly. Bring your fleet to our system if you choose. We will not stop you from arriving. A murmur passed through the officers behind me, quiet but unmistakable. I did not blame them. I felt the same tension pulling at my chest, but I kept my voice level, because the moment my voice shook, everything I was about to say would lose its weight. We are simply not responsible, I continued, for what happens to a fleet that arrives somewhere it was never meant to survive leaving. Her eyes widened, just barely, a reaction so small that most people in that room probably missed it. I did not. You are bluffing, she said, though the certainty in her voice had thinned considerably since the conversation began. I shook my head slowly. We stopped needing to bluff a long time ago, Your Majesty. We stopped the day we stopped being afraid of losing. The channel went quiet. For several seconds, nothing moved, not on her side of the screen, not on ours. Then, without another word, the Queen ended the transmission, and the screen went dark. The council deck exploded into motion the second the connection dropped. Officers spoke over each other, demanding updates, demanding explanations, demanding to know what exactly I had just done. I held up a hand, and the noise settled just enough for me to think. "Grace," I said, "get me a direct line to General Whitcomb. Now." She was already moving before I finished the sentence. Within minutes, the general's voice came through the comm system, tense and clipped. "Ambassador, talk to me. What did you just promise that Queen?" "Nothing I cannot deliver," I said. "Tell me the Kesserine array is ready." There was a pause, longer than I liked. "It is ready," he said finally. "It has been ready for 8 months. But Ethan, using it means crossing a line we agreed never to cross unless our survival depended on it." I looked back through the viewport, at the golden ship still sitting silently among its fleet, waiting, deciding. "It depends on it now," I said. The general exhaled slowly on the other end of the line. "Understood. Standing by on your word." Laura stepped closer to me, her voice low enough that only I could hear it. "Ethan, if she moves that fleet forward before we are ready, the array will not matter. We need time we may not have." "I know," I said. "That is why she is not going to move yet." "How can you be sure of that?" she asked. "Because right now, somewhere on that ship, she is asking her own advisors the same question I just gave her," I said. "What did they build past the drift? And until she has an answer she trusts, she will not risk her fleet on a guess." Laura studied my face for a moment, then nodded slowly, though I could see the worry had not fully left her eyes. An hour passed with no further transmission. Then another. The Dominion fleet held its position, unmoving. A silent wall of ships watching our world from a distance that suddenly felt far too close. Every person on that council deck stayed at their station, eyes on sensors, eyes on screens, waiting for the first sign of movement. It came just before the 3rd hour ended. Grace called out from her console, her voice sharp with urgency. "Ethan, one of their ships just broke formation. Small vessel, moving toward the drift." I moved to her side instantly. "Show me." The screen displayed a single ship, smaller than the others, cutting away from the main fleet and heading directly toward the region where their scouts had vanished days earlier. "She is sending someone to look," Laura said quietly, standing behind us now. "She wants proof before she commits everything." I nodded slowly. "Then let us give her something worth seeing." I turned to the comm panel and opened a direct line to General Whitcomb again. "General, she is sending a scout toward the drift. I want the array to show restraint. No aggression. Let them see exactly enough to understand what they are dealing with, and nothing more." "Understood," he said, initiating passive display protocol now. Minutes passed in silence as we watched the small Dominion ship approach the edge of the drift. Then, gradually, shapes began to appear on the sensor display, vast structures unfolding from where they had remained hidden, silent and patient, for 6 years. Not weapons in the traditional sense, something far more unsettling to a species used to measuring power in size and number. The Dominion scout stopped moving entirely. For nearly a full minute, it simply hung there in space, as if its crew needed time to process what their sensors were showing them. Then, slowly, it turned around and retreated back toward the main fleet, without ever crossing into the drift itself. Grace let out a breath she had clearly been holding. "They saw it," she said. "They actually saw it." I kept my eyes on the screen, watching the scout rejoin the formation. Now we wait for her answer. It came faster than I expected. The main comm channel lit up again, and Queen Shaai appeared on the screen once more, though something in her posture had shifted. She no longer sat with the same unshaken certainty from before. "Ambassador Cole," she said, her voice measured now, careful in a way it had not been during our first exchange. "My scout has returned with images I did not expect to see from a species so young." I said nothing, letting her continue on her own terms. "You claim these structures are not weapons," she said, "though I suspect you will not confirm or deny that claim either way." I allowed myself a small, controlled response. "What I claim, Your Majesty, is that we built something to protect what belongs to us. Whether you choose to test what that something does is entirely your decision to make." Her 4 eyes studied me for a long moment, and I could see the calculation happening behind them, weighing risk against certainty, pride against survival. "You understand," she said slowly, "that backing down now would cost me standing among my own council." "I understand that clearly," I said. "But I imagine losing your entire forward fleet to something you do not understand would cost you considerably more." The silence that followed felt different from the one before. Less confrontational, more thoughtful, as if she were finally allowing herself to consider an outcome other than victory. "What do you propose instead?" she asked finally. I glanced briefly at Laura, who gave the smallest nod of encouragement, then back at the screen. "A boundary," I said. The Kesserine Drift remains neutral ground, unclaimed by either of our peoples. Your fleet withdraws from our system, and in exchange, we agree to formal talks regarding trade and shared research, conducted as equals, not as a species answering to Dominion oversight. The Queen considered this for a long moment, her expression unreadable behind those pale eyes. Around me, the council deck stayed utterly silent, every person holding their breath for her answer. Finally she spoke. You ask for equality with an empire 30,000 years older than your own civilization. I do, I said, because we have earned it, whether your empire chooses to acknowledge that today or not. Another pause stretched between us, longer than any before it. Then, almost imperceptibly, something in her posture eased, just slightly, the tension in her shoulders loosening by a fraction most people would never have noticed. Very well, Ambassador Cole, she said. My fleet will withdraw from your system within the hour. I expect your assembly to honor the terms you have just spoken, or the next conversation between us will not end with words. I understand completely, Your Majesty, I said, and I trust you understand the same applies to your side of this arrangement. Her eyes held mine for one final moment, something unreadable passing behind them, respect perhaps, or simply the recognition of a threat she had chosen not to test. Then, without another word, the transmission ended, and the screen went dark once more. For several seconds, nobody on the council deck moved. Then, slowly, the tension that had gripped the room since the first alarm began to release, officers exchanging glances, some exhaling in relief, others simply staring at the now empty screen in disbelief. Grace turned to me, her voice quiet. Did we actually just do that? I looked back through the viewport, watching as the Dominion fleet began, ship by ship, to pull back from its formation, retreating slowly into the dark beyond our system. We did, I said. Laura stepped closer, her arms finally uncrossing at her sides. You knew she would not risk it. From the very beginning, you knew. I did not know, I said honestly. I hoped. There is a difference. And today, that difference mattered more than anything else we had prepared. Grace allowed herself the smallest smile, the first sign of ease I had seen on her face in hours. So what happens now? I turned back toward the viewport, watching the last of the Dominion ships vanish into the distance, their golden vessel trailing behind the retreating formation like a slow, reluctant shadow. Now, I said, we prepare for the talks she agreed to, and we make certain that whatever she saw past the drift today remains exactly where it belongs, unused, unless we are ever given no other choice. Around me, the council deck slowly returned to its normal rhythm, officers moving back to their stations, voices lowering from urgency to routine. Outside the viewport, the stars remained exactly as they always had, patient and unchanged, indifferent to how close everything had come to breaking that day. But I knew, standing there in the quiet aftermath, that something had shifted permanently in how the galaxy would speak of us from this point forward. Not as a young species to be managed or dismissed, but as one that had looked an empire 30,000 years older in the eye, and had not blinked. And for the first time in 6 years, I allowed myself to believe that whatever came next, we would be ready for it.